Welcome to the Recluse's Cookbook. I'm your host, Vinnie McHale. The Recluse's Cookbook is a monthly podcast where I, your humble recluse, engage in one-on-one conversations with persons of substance. People who may not get the column inches in the media, but their work or life's events are remarkable. On this podcast episode, we have Toronto's finest and Second City's very own John Dawson. John is a screenwriter, story consultant, script editor, and improv teacher. I first met him in April 2010 on his improvisation course for beginners workshop. It was during these 6 weeks he gifted me with two of the most progressive words to replace two of the most regressive words in the English language. These are yes and for no but. Yes and is a simple rule in improvisation games to move a scene on, whereas no but blocks down and shuts down any scene. I may have said no but to a career in improvisational comedy, but I applied yes and to every other aspect of my life, and mistakes, mishaps, and change never seemed so daunting again. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I give you John Dawson. So, what is the best way to describe what it is that you do, John?
Well, I do a number of things, as you know. I'm a screenwriter, a story consultant, and a script editor, which is interesting because as a story consultant and script editor, I'm working with fellow writers in a consulting capacity. And I also work in theater as a dramaturge, which is essentially, as far as I'm concerned, a script editor for theater. The roles are very similar. And all of that comes from my years of doing improvisational theater, and that gave birth to writing sketch comedy back in my Toronto days, and that gave birth to writing for film. And I've always been a film geek. Living in Toronto for so many years, that was perfect for such a person because it's a very movie kind of place. TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, is the second biggest film festival in the world, and I would attend it every year. So, and just saturate myself. In fact, one year I bought the all-you-can-see gold pass, and I saw 33 feature films in 10 days. So that was fantastic, and real stuff that you wouldn't normally be able to see, like the Asian extreme stuff and real out there, kind of stuff that doesn't get distributed. So you can only see it within the context of festivals, and so all of that fed together. And the dramatic arts was my serious, passionate hobby for many years because I came from the visual arts. And I worked as a graphic designer and as an illustrator for a long time. And that's what I trained for at art college. And I ultimately did work fairly internationally. I had an agent in New York for my illustration work as well as one in London and one in Amsterdam. Eventually I got one in Sydney, Australia. Most of my work came from the United States, though. And I worked, coming out of advertising, I moved more into publishing work, and I worked in publishing art for almost 20. But I was always very involved in the theater and starting to write for film. And then that basically took over. That muse called me louder. And so I left the visual arts to solely focus on the dramatic arts. And now the visual arts are more my hobby, and the dramatic arts are more how I make a living. And as you know, that's how we met. I attended one of my improv courses
Correct.
I recall it quite vividly, actually. And I think you got a lot out of it, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I found it very beneficial. Like, say, from when I walked in the door to when I walked out the door, it was like chalk and cheese. For me at that particular point, I like a lot of people, I would have had stage fright.
Yes.
A real. When I was on the stage and I was going, I was fine. You couldn't touch me. But making that separation from, say, the wings to the stage,
yes,
that I always describe it. Even now, it's a bit like the start of Saving Private Ryan.
Yes.
Where you're on the boat and you're going up and down and you just don't know what's going to happen until the trap door of the boat opens. and it could be a free for all, or you might get away with it. But I mean, it's your tuition during that 6 weeks, I think it was, it got me over that hump.
Right.
Kind of, you always said, you were always very clear, and that's your play space, that's your
Yes.
area. Be afraid of, you shouldn't be afraid of it if that's where you want. So it got me over that hump, and ever since then, I've been able to approach it like.
Well, that's wonderful, because the greatest moment to moment fear is certainly, as for us as adults, is humiliation, and that's a learned fear. As little children, we didn't have any fear of being humiliated at all. We just screamed when we wanted to scream and laughed when we wanted to laugh. And we were, eventually socialized, and our formal and informal educations, basically made us compartmentalize these experiences and these expressions of emotions and states of being. And because we have to, there are rules of society that have to be learned, and so you're socialized, and then of course you get into the teen years, and oh gosh, remembers how horrible that was. You're trying to be an individual as well as fit in at the same time. The last thing you want to do is to be ostracized, but at the same time you want to fit in, and with the in crowd or you're not, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of the intimidation that we feel and the fear of humiliation that's developed out of all of that, a lot of us retain for the rest of our lives, sadly. And one of the things that I do recall from the workshop is to create a space where, and I'm not talking about a physical space, I'm talking about an emotional space where people can feel completely free to play, use the key, and to fail, and to fall down and get back up, and they won't be judged. It was always about, if you recall, developing trust with your co-players, and trust and respect, trust being absolutely key, and enjoying the fact that we screw up. The laugh happens? The laugh happens when we screw up.
Yeah.
And that's how we learn. And I don't even like the idea of the word fail or failure. I mean, the concept of it, because it suggests that we must always be searching to succeed and for perfection, when in fact I'm much more about the process as opposed to the end product. And if you obsess yourself with the process and you play, the end product will happen. And as I've said to you and other performers and writers I've worked with, you should be having the most fun up there of anybody in the room. And it took me, I wasn't a natural at this at all. I had to learn it.
Yeah.
And like you, I was petrified. And in improvisation, I studied at the Second City Theater in Toronto, which was born out of the Chicago Company. And Second City is, to this day, one of the major, if not the major, epicenters of this kind of training. And Saturday Night Live casts a lot of their people from Second City, always has, right from the first cast onwards. And look at the players that have come from Second City that went on to work in Saturday Night Live and in the films. John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Mike Myers, all three Canadians. There's Tina Fey, Steve Carell. The list is endless, absolutely endless. So anyway, to go back to that experience of the space, in that space where you can play and experience, and you will learn, because we learn through play. All children instinctively know how to play when they come into the world. They might not know the rules of structured play like games and sports, but they have an innate ability to just play. Have you ever seen a little child playing on their own, making up games? It's remarkable. We all did this. Yeah. And the thing is, what I was doing in those workshops was I wasn't teaching anyone to do anything they didn't already naturally know how to do. They had just forgotten.
Yeah.
We have bifurcated our lives into work and play. And it's a very Western thing. Myself, I absolutely love all the things so I don't consider it work.
Yeah.
I consider it profitable play, which should be the title of my, but I'll get you a signed copy. But I getting over that fear of being judged. Do you know, I'm not doing so much anymore because obviously the pandemic quashed that, and I think I'm fairly done with that for now. For certainly for now. I mean, I've also, as you know, worked in a corporate realm and institution. I've done a lot of institutional work as well, using improvisation, and I will be probably doing more of that in the future once the world comes back to some semblance of normal. Um, but I think that to go back to the joy of it, I feel the last 10, 20 years I've been doing it, I feel more alive on stage than I do in the real world. And so I didn't always MC my own shows. I began to do that about 15 years, and it was out of necessity, really, because as you know, the workshops always end in a live show.
Yeah.
And
Keeping the bridge in.
that's right. Yeah, it was one, certainly that was the predominant venue. And I've also produced shows at the other venues, and I had a troupe for a while, and we toured, and Mondo Bizarro was the name, hotshot key players, and we went to Edinburgh in 2013, and we stormed it. It was fantastic. That was our swan song, actually. That was it. Good night, folks, and we left the building. That was it. Always end in a high note. Yeah.
Fawlty Towers, 12 episodes.
That's it. That was enough. Yeah. Yeah. And we know that's what we did. We were at that stage. I think most of them wanted to strangle me, and I thought because I was the producer, the facilitator, the director of sorts, and also the MC. And by after a couple of years, that was enough, and boom, we hit it. And but I loved MCing. I grew to love it. And for me then, I'm an active part of the show, and I'm improvising as much as they are, but in a slightly different fashion, interacting with the audience. And I guess it affected my teaching, because I've been a teacher for many years, part-time, 26 years, maybe 27 actually. And maybe the teaching affected the improv and vice versa, and one fed the other. So the great thing about it, and I'm sure you'll concur, is that it's not just a performance skill that someone learns through this, it's a life skill.
Yeah. I remember being very, like anyone going into a new job or a new situation, I'd always be very nervous, very, very anxious about it. And then when I did the improv workshop with you, I left a lot of that baggage at the door. I just go in now, and if it happens, it happens. You know what I mean? It doesn't and doesn't. And I always kind of run off the yes and, never the no but, as they say.
Well, that's the key rule, isn't it? The yes and.
Yeah.
For people who don't understand what that means, for people listening to this, it is the essential ABCs of improvisation. The Jack and Jill, the beginners, the first thing you have to learn, or at least I believe it. That's what I was taught. And that is, if you and I are in a scene together and you start the ball rolling, whatever you say is considered. And instead of me blocking that off and saying no to it, I don't just say yes. I say yes and I add something else. And you, in your head, say yes and add something else. If you recall, we actually played games where you had to start the offer with the words yes and. And it's not yes, but it's yes. And then, because I'm going to make an offer to you, you're going to accept it and add something onto it. And I'm going to say yes to what you added onto it. And I'm going to add something onto that. And it's going to build and build and build and build. But what it does is, if you recall, is I think it develops, I know it develops a mental, emotional agility. And part of the mental agility is the ability to bifurcate yourself. There's the self of you that is performing, that is writing this together in the moment, live with your fellow performer or performers. And there's the character that you're playing as well. And so as you recall, in the higher levels of the training I did, I did a lot of character-based work, animal movement, because I taught acting for many years.
Yeah.
And what I did was I flew into the improvisation, a lot of the acting training that I had done, and that I had also personally years and years ago, and also what I used in my own acting teaching, because I was teaching acting as well as improvisation. And I taught at the Beckett Center, and I taught film and television acting at the Actors Center and workshops here. So a lot of that factored into the higher levels of improvisation. And this is how the likes of the Martin Shorts, Second City Trained, Mike Myers, the Rachel Dratches, Amy Poehler's, this is how they create the characters that can go on to appear in franchises. I was at Second City. Here's a story. I was at Second City Wing workshop class, and in the evenings we'd stick around and we'd watch the show. And Mike Myers was on the main stage then. This is before Saturday Night Live, and I was there the night that he introduced the character Wayne of Wayne's World, and so it started as a character he created. It was it was a satire of a typical Toronto type guy from a certain area of Toronto, and he did it. It was in a scene with a fellow performer, and it was a real Romeo and Juliet kind of a thing. But they were of that ilk, of that kind of people, and we all thought it was hilarious because we recognized the characters, and the character of Wayne just carried on and carried on and carried on, and he took it to Saturday Night Live, and then look what happened. So through that process of character-based improvisation, the performers, who are basically writer performers, start creating characters that they can then write through. So in that level, you start to write this character from the point of view of the character that you have created and you embody. So, and from that, there are so many great actors who've that kind of training. Alan Arkin. He's in the Compass Players, which predates Second City, maybe 60 years old. So when I came here 20 years ago, there was nobody doing it. I mean, there were some troops around, but there wasn't anybody teaching it. And I was approached by a theater company, and one of the partners was American, and she recognized the Second City, the name, and the people I had trained with, and she said, "Oh my goodness, no one's doing that here. Would you do workshops for us?" I said, "Certainly," and that's how it all started. And then eventually I began. So, but while I was doing all of that, I was writing, and I came over here to write a screenplay. I was hired by producers to write an animated feature film, and I liked the project. I didn't leap at it right away because I didn't think I was correct for it. But when they explained to me what it was about, and it was inspired by Irish mythology, and I said, "What is it about?" They said, "Fairies." I said, "Well, I write gangster movies. Why would you want me to write a movie about fairies?" And they said, "Well, these are Irish."
Irish people would say, Irish fairies are every bit as bad as gangsters now.
Absolutely.
I know the backstory of them.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened. Yeah. I said, "What do you mean Irish fairies? What do they drink more?" And they said, No. They said, "Well, maybe." But they said, study the Irish mythology. Look at the works of Lady Gregory. So I did. And I began to read about the Tuatha De Danann and what happened. I thought, whoa, these are serious motherfuckers. Jesus, yeah, they're hardcore. They're like gangsters. I can write this. So that's what happened, And I said, "Okay." And they said, "And we have some money, some funding." I said, "Okay, again, yes, and I came over to do research on the project, and I knew there was something, I just didn't go, and I've been here ever since. And I'm Irish now. I have an Irish passport. So that project, like many, didn't get made, but it went on its journey, and that
yes and again,
yes and again. Yeah,
it's amazing. Absolutely. It's amazing the power of those two words. If you apply it properly to any given situation, what can come out of it?
Absolutely. We can have a plan. We can have designs on our life, and then opportunities will present themselves that are not part of our plans, of our grand design. And if we're too linear in our thinking, how they say, think outside the box. If we've created the box ourselves through empirical thinking that we then live within, we are limiting ourselves to possibly extraordinary experiences. And so improvisation taught me not just to have stage confidence, a certain, as I said, mental, emotional agility. It taught me about the ability to accept change when it comes at me. Change is one of the three constants in life. Death, taxes, and change. The first two I try to avoid. The last one I try to accept all the time, and it's not easy. I didn't see myself living in Ireland. I visited Ireland for the first time 30 years ago, and I was the best man at an Irish wedding, and I had a great time. No one told me back then, by the way, that the best man at an Irish wedding is also the MC. I didn't find that out. Yeah, I didn't find that out till I got here. Because in Canada, it can be a different job, right? In Canada, it's like you show up with the ring and you've taken the guy out on the lash the night before, and you make sure he's there on time the next day, and you stand at the wedding reception, you say to the bridesmaids, and that's it. But no, I show up and they said, "Oh, didn't you know?" I said, "No, I didn't know," and they just assumed that I knew. So. And I had a great time. I was performing. That's what I did. I performed at this wedding, and I pretended I was nervous. I was performing a lot back in Canada, so I wasn't nervous at all. But I pretended that I was, and I did this whole bit, and where I told them that I had prepared for 6 months. And that I was nervous, and I had all this paper in my hands, and I let my voice crack like this, and they bought it, and I had great fun with it, and I had such a good time. I promised myself I would come back, and this is 30 years ago. There was no Celtic Tiger then. People didn't have. I found the Irish so generous and so curious about me, and they were so incredibly generous and warm. It left an indelible impression. I always swore I would come back, and when the opportunity presented itself 10 years later to work on this script, yes, and they came over, and look what happened.
Amazing journey since.
Yeah, and I feel my journey is, in a lot of ways, only just starting. I have so many projects in development. I had a feature in development that was funded to go. And we were 5 weeks away. I was the director, a live action feature, and in 2009. And unfortunately, because of the economic crisis at the time, the rug got pulled out from under us. And 5 weeks before pre-production, the funding was pulled on the Irish side, and it was a 3-country co-production, €3 million budget, which is quite a big budget for a first-time director myself, and the whole thing collapsed. And I learned out of that okay, there's change that I have to accept. That was a tough one to accept, but I did eventually. And I have so many projects in development now. It's I can hardly keep up.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that about having so many projects in development. As you know, I'm a huge Oliver Stone fan, and I reread his biography there, Chasing the Light. Until I read it, I didn't realize he had worked on so many projects that didn't see the light of day. Like, I mean, people don't see that end of it, do they? No. Really?
They have no idea. And I do. I learned it the hard way. And yes, he's had many failed projects, and he came out of writing as well. That's right. Screenwriter becomes becoming a director. And I wrote for other people for years, and all my heroes started out as writers and then became directors, so they were writer directors. And he would know, and I found that out. What can happen in 2009? There are so many variables, and there are so many pieces to it. And when someone watches a 2-hour movie, all they have is that experience, and that's fine. That's all you're meant to have. But behind that 2 hours is millions of hours by many, many people. And it takes the average, it used to be, and it probably still is for a medium, 7 to 12 years to make your first feature film. Yeah, people have no idea. Yeah. And I was in year 8 of development. We were doing well. We were doing really well, and which was a very big budget for a first-time director, but it didn't work out, and that's okay. That's fine. I have many other things on the go now. Yeah. It's not easy to accept some of those changes. Change will happen to you whether you want it or not. It's how you deal with it. How flexible are you? And again, that's what improvisation can teach us, to say yes and, as painful as it may be.
I know when I first met you, I was at a similar kind of situation. We're talking about change. I realized there's 2 kinds of change. There's the change that you're responsible for in your own
Hmm.
life, like whether you have that extra pint or you don't eat takeaway food or whatever it might be to make you feel a bit better the next day. And then there's the change you have absolutely no control over.
Exactly.
And the hardest one is the one that I found was the one that you have no control over,
Yeah.
because that's the one that can eat you up as well. Like if you don't deal with it, like.
Absolutely. And, all of us went through terrible trauma during that period. Well, not the bankers, but um, all kind,
The
even
people who
smart.
are paying for it, yeah.
That's right. Even smart money got burned back then. But I went through a similar kind of a recession in the late 80s, 90s that occurred in North America and in Britain, but didn't really happen here because there wasn't the economy then. So what happened to the Irish, was quite new to them, but it wasn't new to me. And I was here, and I could see it coming. And I could see the real estate situation was a bubble, and there was no way I could convince anybody here not to go out and get 100% financing or even more so. That was crazy.
Yeah.
Because the general thinking was, if I don't get in now, I'll never be able to afford to. And I saw that happen in the late 80s in Canada and Toronto. It happened in New York, and it happened in London, and much the same when the condo markets there began to explode. And the yuppies at the time, they were the millennials of the day. They were buying up condos, never planning to occupy. They were speculating. They had this thing called disposable income. I love that term. I've never had that. Things that are disposable and have income, but never disposable income. And they were buying up all these condos for the purpose of flipping them as soon as they were done, just purely for profit. And they got caught, and the whole thing collapsed. It just completely collapsed. That was the night. And so this was similar, what was occurring, but slightly different. And but I knew something was going to happen, and sure enough, it did.
Yeah.
So I wasn't caught in it, thankfully, but not from a real estate point of view, but I was caught in it from the filmmaking point of view, because all of that affected all the budgets everywhere. And I certainly wasn't the only one. And not that really makes you feel that much better. So yes, you're absolutely right. Those are the two types of change, and the latter is the toughest one to deal with. But you pick yourself up, you get on the horse, you get back into the ring, or whatever metaphor you want to use, and you keep going. And you learn from it. You can learn. I think it's really important to know what you want in life, but it's almost more important to know what you don't want, because you're going to get more of that. And how do you deal with it? It's about one's flexibility. When I met you, you were doing stand-up and pursuing acting, and now you're developing your own properties and things like that. So that's very exciting.
Well, that was it. Like, going back to what you said there, that's really about knowing what I want and what I don't want. I think that's a huge key of it, is that if we go back to that 2008, 2009 time, I probably could have went out and got involved in the property game and whatever it was, because I was making the money to kind of, like, I wouldn't have made the money to pay back the mortgage, but they would have given it to me, sort of thing anyway.
Right.
So, I mean, it was a case of where I knew then that was not what I wanted, and I was able to kind of go. Sometimes I look back now and go, maybe I should have done, but for all of a minute, and then I kind of go, no, I was better off not too young. I kind of, I'd be the first to say that I did not have the maturity back then in my 20s that I would have got in my 30s.
Yes, absolutely. Well, as an artist, I've had good years and bad years, and I've been self-employed for most of my working life, and that could be very precarious. And then I came over here and I started all over again. So I'm not in the property market, and I'm very happy about that, because I think we're sort of, it's hardwired into us that we have to own something, and we have to put down roots. But to be honest, I'm not sure we do. And I think a lot of people are rethinking that. And look at the situation here in Ireland now. It's terrible. I mean, there's a lot of first-time buyers who can't even afford to get in. And first-time buyer homes are being gobbled up by companies, and then rented out at exorbitant rates. And so it's a very sad situation.
Do you see a similar kind of thing to what you saw back in the 80s and 90s in New York and Canada happening again here?
Possibly similar but different. Yeah. I saw it from the perspective of being an urbanite. I was living in downtown Toronto, and so the condo market was just exploding then, and for all the reasons I was telling you. And it's interesting that we all thought, okay, well, that the lessons learned out of that, they'd be learned, because we only learn experientially. We something can happen to somebody else and they can tell you all about it, but you haven't learned it by hearing it from them. You have to go through it yourself. And I thought, great, well, then people will be mature and intelligent about the condo market. The condo market exploded in Toronto a few years ago again, for different reasons. And so here, I think there are less condominiums being built, a lot of homes finally. But look what's happening to them. It's not individuals that are buying them.
Yeah,
It's companies that are buying. And this is what happened after the big crash, in 2009 is what happened. Vulture funds came in and bought places up, and there wasn't, and if you recall, nothing was built for the longest time.
Right.
They were giving away mortgages, and then after that, you couldn't get one. So look what's happened. Because of scarcity, there are not enough places to rent, so the rents are sky high. They've gone up an incredible amount. In most of Europe, rents have gone up maybe about 15% over the last 12, 15 years. Here, they've gone up 60%.
Where does it end, do you think?
I don't know. Obviously, there has to be more regulations in place. The government's approach at present is to change it from a tax point of view to make it less attractive for these companies to do this. But I don't really know. That's not my forte.
It's interesting there. You were saying that you're here 21 years,
mm-hmm.
and you've been involved in the arts scene pretty much for those 21 years. How much has the arts scene in Dublin, Ireland, in general, changed in that 21 years? Has it grown?
It has. I wouldn't say exponentially. It has grown. My focus has been mostly in the dramatic arts side of things. I can't speak for the visual arts, but it certainly has grown. There's a lot more production happening here, indigenous as well as buy-ins, and Ireland being used as a location as well as its facilities. So. And that has a lot to do with the tax incentives, like Section 481, which came out of which brought the big Hollywood movies, the Bravehearts and what have you.
Yeah.
And because of all of that, we can slag those off, but because of all of that, those have funded the studios out in Wicklow. Therefore attract productions like Vikings, The Tudors, and those hire a lot of people.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you're developing an industry. You're developing a lot of the skills that are required for your indigenous projects as well. I think that's developed quite well here. I think there's world-class people. There's no question. The same in Canada. Canada's phenomenal production facilities, phenomenal crews in Canada, and they've been shooting Hollywood movies for a number of reasons. One is that it's cheaper. The Canadian dollar is generally much less than the American dollar, so it makes economic sense. The rates of pay are lower. The crews are fantastic. The locations are amazing, and not everyone's packing a handgun, so it's fairly safe.
Yeah.
And here we have now. I've seen the production side of it really blossom in terms of indigenous projects, where I see a far greater need in development of stories, of scripts themselves. That's coming along. There's no question about it. 20 years ago, if I was marketing myself as a script editor and story consultant, I wouldn't have gotten anything. People wouldn't know what I was talking about. The producers and directors here wouldn't.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Like when you say that I remember that time. I was I was at that age where I was going to university, and I remember a lot of the movies coming out back then, and it's amazing to see how much it has changed. When
Yes.
you say that, like, it's this idea of development didn't seem to be there.
No.
Whereas now it's beginning to
Yeah.
come through.
Yeah, I agree, and that's because the funding bodies, the people that they hire, are better trained at what is development. And let's go back to the core of this. It's all about the story.
Yeah.
And you need a story, a very, very powerful story that therefore will be well developed and then adapted into a screenplay. And when I say it has to be, a screenplay has definite rules and a form. It's one of the things I critique engaged as a script editor. Those rules are bendable and sometimes breakable, but like all rules, you have to know them, you have to learn them and respect them. And so it's two-pronged: a powerful story and the proper kind of screenplay document to communicate that story, because that's what a screenplay is. It is the blueprint for a movie or a TV show, animated or live action. So all of that has evolved quite a lot over the last 20 years. And I'm now quite happy that I'm in part of that, working as a story consultant and script editor. As you know, I just worked on probably the first adult animated TV series, and I was there early days of this program, and that was a lot of fun. And I'm working on a couple more. Like right now, I'm actually developing one of my own with a partner, my associate. So I'd say that area has grown a lot. That said, I think it needs to grow a lot more. And look at the changes that have occurred in the last few years because of the streaming companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many series being made now, and the way we view material, the way we view content has changed a lot. I mean, I'm maybe it's just an old school thing to say, but I still love going to the cinema. Well, it's the ideal because we sit there in the dark and we don't know the people around us, and we all experience something collectively, and that's quite magical.
Yeah, that's the one thing I miss. I've always went to the cinema, and it's the one thing I miss during this pandemic is after a week's work, heading out on a Saturday afternoon to catch a couple of films at the Lighthouse. It's just And do you know, I when it does come back, and it will come back, I'm just going to enjoy it every more. I'm going to go every Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you. I live fairly close to the Lighthouse, right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, that trip 30 years ago, my first trip here, the one I mentioned earlier, one of the things we did was went to the movies, and we went to the original Lighthouse.
Up on Abbey Street, wasn't
it? I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Academy is there now. Yeah.
Yes, and I loved it, and I remember it. I remember the movie I saw. It was Orlando with Tilda Swinton, and the whole Dublin experience was fantastic. I remember it vividly. But anyway, yeah, I agree with you. The Lighthouse, I live near Smithfields. It's a wonderful cinema, and back in Toronto. Toronto's such a movie town. I would go to the movie, and if I wasn't in the cinema, I was in the theater. And if I wasn't in the theater, I was in a comedy club. That's what I did. That was my hobby, because during the day I was in the art studio, and I would close the door and I'd be in one of those three.
Yeah.
So I hear you. Yes, I think all of us are experiencing that sense of loss, of not, because we need the collective experience.
Yeah.
You can have a drink at home, but there's something about going to the pub and hearing the din of the place, right? And feeling that energy, and you know what I mean when I say energy. Yeah.
I walked out of work last Friday, and I think in the years since the lockdown has been down, I've never been so hungry for a pint. Friday night. I just, and not like I could go into any off license, get any brand of beer, get a pint glass, but it's just not the fucking same thing, is it?
No, because it's missing the other part, the social part, and that's a big part of of life here. Crack culture. I'm a
Yeah,
crack addict. I'm a total crack addict.
so am I.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like weird. I mean, it's like, I was just saying about the drink, but it's the same about I know in my local bar, they love to put on MacGyver. Now we've seen it umpteen times before, but it don't matter. You're with the lads watching MacGyver in the bar. Like, it's fucking great.
and that's a brilliant idea, because then you can all talk about it as it's going on, and you know what's coming because you've seen it before, and you're sharing that experience.
And there's always a lad that knows a lad who tried to do the exact same.
That's brilliant. It's inspired, really.
It's great. Like, it's what I miss. And storytelling now, I've always had an agra for it. Growing up as a kid, I was always fascinated by storytelling. It is my favorite thing, sitting down and listening to a story. And I was very lucky in the sense that my family, my mother's family in particular, are very gifted storytellers. They can come home and they'll tell the story that they heard when they were out at the co-op, and all of a sudden they start telling the story and they become the characters, and by the end of it, like, it might not resemble what was said, but you had a good bit of crack out of it.
A family of raconteurs. How lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's just waiting for their chance, to tell a story. I can relate to that. I do. I wouldn't say I come from a family of that. I'm probably the only one in my family orientated that way, and I probably bore the hell out of them sometimes. But I completely understand, and I love hearing people's stories as well as love telling them. And I guess that's why I fell into story consulting and script editing, because I wanted, it's just my orientation. And so how joyous, for me, it is another form of play. So a word that sometimes when we were young, it almost became a dirty word. Stop playing around. And in actual fact, how many times were you reprimanded for playing around? When in fact, play is absolutely. How many times in my workshops have people shown up there and they're not performers? They have no desire whatsoever to be a performer. They're there for all kinds of reasons, for stress management, to develop communication skills, just for the crack, just to meet people, just to get out of their comfort zone. Oh, that's certain. Getting out of your comfort zone. That's what happened to you. You were dealing with getting out of your comfort zone, and so was I. I had moved to Toronto and I didn't know anybody, and it's a big, cold city. And my an old childhood friend, he then a few months later, and we'd hang out a bit. And he phoned me up one day and he said, "Do you want to go to Second City and do classes, workshop classes?" He said, "Well, we see the shows and they have workshops there. Do you want to go?" I said, "Why?" "To meet girls, I said, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." And so I did, and we did, and that wasn't the only reason. It was also because I was being a visual artist, and be self-employed. I'd spend so much time alone and in my own head, and I thought, oh, this is something I need to do, because I wasn't very good at presenting my work. I was difficult to do. And if you're freelance, you got to go out and sell yourself. Half of what you do is promoting yourself to get the other half. And I wasn't very good at that. I was good at the work, but I wasn't very good at getting the work. And so I said, yeah, I need this. And I didn't really have a circle of friends, because it's a big, huge city. And so he and I did, and my life changed. It's just filled with similar thinking people, all very like-minded. As you know, from the way that it's taught, and if it's taught correctly as it was then, you immediately begin to bond with people and you learn how to do that. Say yes and to trust. I developed a circle of friends that some of whom I still know to this day. So, and so many of the people have no aspiration and generally don't.
You mentioned a very interesting word there that I hear quite a bit when I was training. I was at university, and then I did other little bits and pieces in other places, and of course with yourself. And the word trust comes up time and time again.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that and its importance in a workshop and say in the workplace and in life?
I don't think there's trust and respect are the key components to it. You don't even have to have affinity for someone to be able to collaborate with them if you trust and respect them. There are all kinds of creative partnerships where the partners didn't like each other, but they trusted and respected each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And this is paramount for, I believe, the two working together. For a relationship to function and for it to last, any kind of relationship, a platonic relationship, a business relationship, a romantic relationship, trust and respect. And to trust someone is to know that he or she will hold you safe if you fail or fall, and not judge you, that they are empathetic towards you and you towards them. And that takes a while to develop as adults. Children, we get there very quickly. We don't know any better. We trust our instinctive skills. We have a lot of intuition, and remember, intuition is what we develop through repetition. Instinct is what we come into the world with. And then, if you recall, we would play a lot of trust games and exercises to develop that, between looking at each other and very intensely, a lot of listening exercises, even so far as physical theater work, fall into each other's arms and things like that. And that all sounds very flaky, but if you recall, it really does work. Because think about how a relationship develops. You don't know someone, you meet for whatever reason, you begin to exchange, you're testing the waters, both of you. Do you have anything in common? What are the things you have in common? That can be things that you like and dislike, areas of interest. As that you develop an acquaintance, that as that develops, you begin to share more of your personal inner life, things that you hold dear, perhaps things that were very painful, things that someone could use against you, and to see how that is received by the recipient. If they receive that in an empathetic fashion and they give something back to you of themselves, right, then you obviously, if you respond the same way, if this is developing in the right way, and eventually acquaintances become friends. And when I say friends, that can be I use that was a way of describing a platonic relationship, but it wouldn't be that much different in a business relationship as well.
Yeah.
In a business relationship, just recently I said to an associate that ultimately, if and when funding happens, require a partnership agreement. That's something in writing. It's something I don't ever not have that. But that's to protect, not just each other, but our families. And if something should happen to me during the course of a project, and I predecease my associate, my business partner, I know that my family will be taken care of. And these are things that are done in the case of worst case scenarios. They're preparing for worst case scenarios, hoping that they will never be needed, but you still have to have that. And I find that to even get to that point, though, you still have to have gone through this dance where and it can be quite a delicious, lovely dance to develop that trust for another person, and know that they can trust you equally. And respect is similar and different. You have to respect the differences that you have with somebody else. I have associates whose likes are certainly not mine. They are in fact my dislikes. But I love it when people argue about such things, like in the workshops, I would deliberately throw a kitten into the dog pound and say things like, okay, tell me about the movies that you like, and tell me about the movies you don't like. Yes. And tell me about the actors that you like, and tell me about the actors you can't stand. And then I would just sit back and hear the arguments. And arguing about such things is ridiculous because it's so subjective. It's like arguing about sandwiches. You like chicken, I like ham. So what? Nothing is accomplished by that. Yeah. So it's under the heading of respect. It's respecting each other's likes and dislikes. And obviously, the more that we, I think, the closer we get to someone is when we have more, when we have more and more in common with each other. But the respect part has to be when we don't have something in common. We have to respect that that exists. It is what it is, because everyone's bringing their own shit to the table. I come from another culture. Yes, I come from Canada, but I worked in the States a lot, and I've been through the States, so I'm very much North American. My ethos is, I'm told, much more New Yorkian, which I like, because it's quite direct. And so I come to the table with that stuff, and you come to the table with something different. And I need to respect where you came from, that you would not have experienced what I have experienced, and your perspectives, your likes and dislikes are different from mine. What we're trying to do is what? Create the space where we can collaborate together, a common ground. Part of a common ground is trust and respect.
That's what I actually noticed about you from day one as a tutor in improv and character acting, was that you were able to stand in front of someone, and it didn't matter where they were from or how much experience they had or whatever, you were able to gauge with them at the level they were at. That's quite a remarkable skill.
Well, thank you. I suppose it comes down to striving to never be judgmental, striving for it. We no matter how much we do judge, we'll have instinctual movements or feelings, not based on any information. It's just animal. That's the animal of it. And also to be curious about people, to be genuinely curious about people. I think that's what led me into the dramatic arts from the visual arts. Making still imagery wasn't enough for me. I achieved what I wanted to achieve as an illustrator. I won some big awards and blah, blah, blah. And I was able to work on big projects, and I had an agent in New York, and very few artists did, because it's very competitive, but it wasn't enough. My orientation is more towards people and storytelling. And I'm genuinely curious about, because everyone is an extraordinary world unto themselves. They're vast, fabulous landscapes, and I'm interested.
Do you think that's what makes the best actors and the writers and directors? A curiosity in people and why they do stuff?
Absolutely. I don't hesitate to say yes to that. Years ago, I worked in advertising, and I suppose if I was very success orientated, I would still be there. And I was offered numerous positions as art director and what have you, and I turned them all down because it just wasn't my orientation, and everyone was very profit motivated. And sure, we need money, but money's only, it's only a tool. My dad said money's only a tool, but I wish I had a toolbox full of it sometimes. And I agree, but at the same time, how much do you need? So I would agree completely with that, because it is my natural orientation, and it led me into the dramatic arts. And everyone that I've ever met who is successful at what they do, and when I say successful, I don't mean necessarily wealthy or famous. I mean people who are happy doing what they're doing, and they're doing it the way they want to do it, are curious about people. There are a lot of people in it that aren't. They are in it for other reasons, but the ones that I think that I've found have been to be the most happy and successful are curious. And when you are, then you should be able to stand in front of somebody and see them for who and what they are, and try to see and know more. And as a teacher, I don't like. I don't think I've ever taught anyone anything. I've just created a space where they can self-learn.
Process of discovery,
yeah. Create a safe space where people can self-learn. I'm a guide. I think that's the way that, I don't know what other teachers think, but that's what I would. And many times throughout my work, I've thought about moving away from teaching. I'm too tired of it, and it's all energy out, and there's nothing left to me at the end of the day for my own work. And I am now doing less of it because I have so much of my own that I wish to do. But I'll probably always continue in some way. It's just No matter how many times I say I'll stop, I probably won't. I think that I'm happy to say that a lot of people came back to the workshops many, many times and went through many levels and went on to create troops and things like that. I trained a few thousand people since I've been here.
Wow.
And it's really exciting to see the troops that people have created and what have you. And I certainly have no regrets about that. I don't think I'll do that much more of it in terms of improvisation when the world comes back to normal, as I was saying earlier. I did work in, as you know, in the area of wellness.
Yeah.
And I may do some more of that. I'm not sure. All the benefits that you know and I know that are there are healthy. They're very healthy for us. And when I say wellness, of course, I'm talking mental health. And it was in 2013 that I was called up by some people, three nursing students who were creating a thesis piece, a final year thesis piece, and they wanted to create a dramatic arts workshop for mental health service users, but also service providers and caregivers. And my name kept coming up apparently, and so they got in touch with me. And this is through DCU's School of Nursing, and we had a chat about it, and they had a budget, and the agency was funded. And I said, okay, yes, and I began to. I asked them what they were looking for, and they were looking for a very experiential kind of a course because they all had some affiliation with the dramatic arts, and they knew the benefits. They knew what you and I know, and they wanted that to create a space and they wanted a facilitator to create that space for mental health service users, but also service providers. They were using a model from Finland with an axiom: hats at the door. Leave your hat at the door. So it wouldn't matter if you were in care or you were a caregiver or you were a psychologist or psychiatrist. You couldn't say who or what you were. You just had to come and do the workshop. I said, okay, that's great. The pitch is level. It's the only way I roll. Everyone's equal. And so they didn't want a show at the end. They just wanted something experiential. And that's what I did. And of course, a lot of them were quite medicated, the service users, and because that's modern medicine, mental health medicine. But they had a wonderful time. And a lot of good came out of that, and so much so that I was engaged to do quite a number of those for the next few years with St. James Hospital Dublin and DCU's Recovery College. And will I go back to do that? I may in the future. I'm not sure. The most recent one was, for me, very rewarding, Vinny. It was at St. Patrick's University Hospital within their mental health service. And I'll tell you why it was rewarding for me, because when I was a boy, one of my favorite writers was Jonathan Swift. And that hospital, people don't know this, but that hospital exists because he had left in his will £12,000. Can you imagine how much money that was back then?
Small fortune, that.
And it had to go to the design and construction of a hospital solely devoted to mental health. And he had stipulated that it had to be, built in the grounds of an existing medical hospital and affiliation. Mm-hmm. And it really was the first, if not the world, in Europe. There was something in France at the time, in Paris. He saw it. It wasn't a hospital. It was more of a prison. He said, we're not going to do that. And he said, and this is what he wanted. He never saw it. He died, and the hospital was then built. It took years, but they built it long after his death. And I had the opportunity to do these courses, improv-based courses there with mental health service users, and had an absolutely and the storytelling and all the same stuff that we did, that you and I did, that you did within my courses, I did with those folks. And they would come for a couple of hours and have an extraordinary time. In many cases that people would say, I haven't laughed in months.
Yeah.
and just feel the benefits of laughing. How we all feel better after a laugh, Yeah, it's good. All the dopamine, and that creates all the serotonin and adrenaline and the endorphins. Yeah, it's great. And there you go. We're having the crack. We just happen to be in a mental health hospital instead of a pub.
Would you like to see more of that being, say, brought into, say, the professional workplace, the educational workplace, the classrooms, that sort of stuff? Because we have had talked about this before, with regards, stifling creativity and what can be done and achieved if you introduce creativity into a workplace or a educational space or wherever.
I without a doubt, and in that spirit, I have done that. I've worked for Google here in Dublin, for Twitter. Did a huge workshop for Twitter, numerous workshops for people at Airbnb, quite a number of workshops. And again, using improvisation. What were those workshops about? Communication and collaboration skills, team building. All the same rules apply. Trust and respect, yes and, listening, accepting offers, building together. There it is. What is a team at Google, is another way of saying ensemble, as ensemble players within a troupe, right? We're doing the same thing, aren't we? Sure. So, creativity is a huge, broad term. Once upon a time, people were taught only the artists are creative. That's ridiculous. A business person who comes up with a business plan and finds the seed funding and develops an IP into something successful is just as creative as a painter or a musician. It's just a different use of creativity, and that really needs to be, I think, a part of our primary education as well as our secondary, all the way through to post-secondary. It's crucial, and that's changing here. I'm very happy to see that, to have been part of it. One year, I was one of my students was a teacher out in Bray, and she asked me if I would do courses for young learners, first year secondary school students, and as part of their orientation. She said it all tends to be sports orientated, but could you do a couple of days of improvisation with these students? They've just met each other. And she said, I think it would help prevent the development of cliques right away, and also maybe prevent bullying. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I had a ball. It was terrific. And it was within the first few weeks, so it was September, they didn't really know each other very well, but you could already see the little tribes developing. The girls were already too cool for school, but they were rolling their eyes and sighing. But once we got into it, they loved it, and they had an absolute ball. And years earlier, I was asked would I teach even younger children improvisation, and I said sure. So I went off and I did these courses on weekends for kids, and they'd be an hour, and they were adorable. The 8 to 10-year-olds were the best age group, right? Because they're all the little oddballs. They're the ones that don't do sports on the weekends, right? So they're like us, the little versions of us, the little odd ones. And it was so much fun. And because they're still kiddies, but they're growing up, and they're developing personalities by the age of 10. And I was giving them, here's a great example. I was giving them an exercise, and you did this exercise with me in the beginning of the work, and they're all standing there and they got their eyes closed, and I've been doing breathing work and relaxation work to get them, warmed up. It's just warm up, right? And before this is my first class with 10-year-olds. Before that, I wondered, how the hell am I going to do that with this age group? And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. I won't do this any differently than I would teach the adults. Just no profanity, fewer polysyllabic words, no sexual references, and so I just the same basic games, the same stuff. So there they are. Their eyes are closed and they're standing feet shoulder width apart. Have an exercise. It's crazy where you rub your tummy in one direction, your bum in the other. And of course, you can't do it. It's a lot of fun. You look silly doing it and you feel silly doing it. And then I said something that I would obviously always say to the adults. And I'd say, And now I'd like you to try to recall one of the happiest memories from your childhood. And one kid in the back says, "This is my childhood." And I was stumped. I just stood there. It's like this kid swept my legs out from under me, and all the kids could open their eyes. They could see me. I was completely kiboshed. I didn't know what to say, I just got taken out by it like a 10-year-old, and they loved it. They saw the teacher now flustered, and I laughed, and they laughed, and I just thought, that's so cool. That is so pure, isn't it?
You couldn't write it like.
You couldn't write it. No,
It's
it was
brilliant.
fantastic.
Finally, I asked that question I want to ask all people who devote themselves to their craft. What makes you do it?
And life is short. I love what I do. I'm loving doing this. When I get a script to work on, somebody else's, I love the fact that I'm helping someone realize something that they love to do. That's great for me because I get to work on both sides of the fence. I have my own properties where I engage development people. I've been very, very fortunate to work with some wonderful development people who taught me how then to develop. And then I work on the other side, whereas consulting, other writers. So I do it, just everything I do is for that. Simple as that.
And that concludes this episode of The Recluse's Cookbook. Thank you for listening.